we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Oh, you and I, we got it.
A goat pen is a pretty important part of owning goats. Goats are wonderful stinkers. They will jump on your car. They will eat your flowers. They will get into your garden and eat your lovely veggies and the grapevines that you've been caring for so tenderly. And then they will happily cross the road, not bothering to look both ways. What is a goat pen? A goat pen is an area that you give your goats to keep them safe from dangers that come in the form of predators and toxic plants and you, because you'll be mad if they eat your prized flowers. The goat pen will also be where their shelters, their feeders, their minerals, and emergency supplies are kept. It will be their safe place. Goats really do need us to help keep them safe and contained within known boundaries and borders. They need a goat pen. Before bringing home your first goat, now really, you'll want to read that article next to be prepared for your first goat, link below. But before you bring those cuties home, you need to have your goat pen planned out, laid out, and put together. And if you're like me and end up loving your goats and wanting to spend time with them, then this will be a really special place that you'll want to be comfortable for you and your goat. And a place to make memories and raise your happy goats. So let's start to make that plan. Let's start by thinking about what the goals for your goat herd are. Will you be raising pet goats or dairy goats or even meat goats? What you need in your goat pen will be determined by what kind of goat you choose. Pet goats will need far less than dairy goats and meat goats, but we'll get into that in just a bit. How big should a goat pen be? Your goat pen size needs to be as big as your property will allow. Goats love to roam. A pack goat can travel up to 25 miles a day, so you can see that it's within their capabilities to go far. If a goat were in their natural environment without the confines of fencing and boundaries, they would browse their terrain and keep moving as far and wide as they could to find the food that they love. Most of us don't have that leisure of unlimited land, however. Each individual goat will need about 200 square feet per goat, with about 20 square feet for sleeping. Goats need to live in pairs, so you'll need at least 400 square feet and adequate room for them to sleep at night. Plan ahead in your goat herd growth as well. And if you think you won't get more than 2, think again. It's highly likely that your herd will grow. So you'll need to plan ahead and be able to expand your goat area or have maybe several goat pens planned out. The more area you give the goats, the happier and healthier they will be. So how do you pen up a goat? Goats are pretty sneaky and crafty. If they want to get out, they will do their very best to do just that. But there are ways to keep your goats contained in the area that you designate for them. A good fence will keep a goat where they need to be, and there are several options that you can choose from. You can decide which one works best for your situation. Each of the options that I'll mention in just a bit have worked for many goat owners, and one of them will be a great option for you. If your goat sees lots of yummy forage outside of their pen, they will do everything they can to find themselves outside of their pen with the goodies that they see. So picking the fence and then making it very secure will be of utmost importance. So what kind of a fence is best for goats? There are 5 excellent options for goats. This video isn't about fencing, but you can watch that video on my channel about that. It's called Fencing for Goats. So you can choose a pallet fence. I've used a pallet fence for about 5 years on my place here. Sheep and cattle panels, woven wire, electric fence, barbed wire, and even a wood fence. Any of these will be a great choice. And like I said, I've personally used a pallet fence for my goats for probably the last 5 years, and I've had great success with it. But do take some time to study the options in that video and then decide what's best for you. Keep in mind that the fence should be at least 4 feet tall enough to keep your goats from jumping over. You'd be amazed at how high a goat can jump. Now, let's talk about gates for a goat pen. There are days that I've huffed around fuming that I was going to take out all of the gates in the goat pen and never let the goats out again. It was my precious grapevines that I planted that last spring that were doing marvelously, and then they were eaten by the goats, and they're now dead. But gates are an important thing to think about. When you plan out your pen, you need to plan where you will locate the gates and think about several things. You want to think about the location. You want to put your gates in an area that is easy to get to. Think about if you'll be needing to back up a pickup or a car up to the gate. And is it in a low spot where water will accumulate and make a puddle? Will a snowdrift make it hard to open in the winter months? These are just a few things to think about as you make your plans. And you need to think about the size. Please make the gate big enough, at least big enough to get a wheelbarrow through, maybe even a 4-wheeler that can pull a little cart. You will regret the day you got goats if you can't get in with essential tools because you made the gate too small. And a self-closing and goat-proof gate is really important. Goats nibble and nose and get into everyone's business. They can find a way to open and close, just to stump you, any gate they can. And with your arms full of hay and who knows what else, it's hard to always get the gate closed. And your kids will go in and out to play with the goats, and it's hard for them to get the gates closed every single time. It's very helpful for you and protective of your grapevines to get a self-closing gate. And let's think about the gate opening direction. It's also helpful for gates to open in and against a wall or a fence. If your goats get out, you need to be able to open the gate and not have anything blocking the goat's entry when you're trying to get them back in. Having a gate open in will also be helpful when you're entering and your goats are clamoring to get out. You can push them aside as you enter. And the last thing that is helpful to know about gate direction is that goats will climb and stand on fences and gates, and if they stand on a gate, they can stand on it and then push it open potentially. Now, the number of gates is something, really think about this as well. This can also be a personal preference. I like to have several gate options, but that's not absolutely necessary. Let's talk about cheap goat house plans and shelters. An essential part of your planning will be thinking about where you live and the climate. Your goats will need to be protected from extreme temperatures, both heat and cold. They need shelters that will get them out of the heat and warm in the cold. Goats also hate to be wet, so it's also a place to protect them from the rain, hail, and wind. Goats were actually created to live in very dry climates and will usually do better in that type of a climate. And if you do live in a wet climate, however, it is possible to raise healthy goats though. In your goat pen plan, you'll need to plan out how you'll drain water away from their living area so they won't be standing in mucky, wet pens. By far, these are the cheapest options for building goat shelters. So this is a double-sized goat shelter. I have a single-sized goat shelter, but there are many options that you can choose from for your goat shelter. And a barn on your property, like this one behind me, can also be turned into a goat shelter. Keep in mind that it is best to give each goat 10 to 15 square feet in each shelter. When you design and build your shelter, keep these things in mind. They need to be predator proof. If you live in an area where there are known predators, you really need to lock up your goats and to keep them safe at night. It needs to be a windbreak. If you live in an area with high winds and wind chill, then your goats really need to be able to get out of the wind. Rain and snow protection. Goats really don't like to get wet. The moment one drop of rain lands on your goat, they will hightail it to the barn. And ventilation. All animals, including goats, need their shelters to have good ventilation. Otherwise, the smells build up and the excess moisture just causes problems. Okay, flooring. This will become a matter of personal preference, really. Some shelters will have cement, some wood, and some even dirt. I actually prefer dirt floors in my goat shelters because cement would become incredibly cold in the winter months and would need a lot of bedding just to keep them warm. Wood floors have such a high potential to rot, and believe me, there will be a lot of moisture from the goats. They do not go out to use the bathroom. They stand up and then relieve themselves, and it gets wet fast. So dirt floors are actually what I prefer, but you decide what works best for you. And location. I just recently moved actually this goat shelter over here. It's been in the same place for 5 years in the wrong place, and I never took the time to move it, and every day I was annoyed. You will need to place your shelters in a place that doesn't block access by moving by it with a wheelbarrow or hay sleds, and you'll need to be able to clean it regularly. So put it in a well planned out area so that you can get to it and get it clean and help your goats if need be. Whichever shelter you choose for your goats, just know it will be your goat's safe place where they sleep and can get to a safe place and get out of the weather. Now let's talk about goat storage. You will also want to think about storage for your goat items. This barn, or however you set it up, will need to hold hay, grain, medicine, supplies, and bedding. You'll want to know how much hay you will need to purchase for your goats for a year, and you can easily figure that out with the goat hay calculator that I'll link below. And then once it's purchased, the hay is purchased, get it covered so it isn't getting wet and molding all year long. So take some time to plan out the goat medications that you'll need. Goats do get sick just like you and I do, and sometimes goats are really, really strong until they are really sick, and then it's hard to get them better again. It's better to have all of the medications on hand in those just in case emergencies. You can actually read more or watch more about medications on my channel here. There's a video called Goat Emergency Medications. And knowing what a goat eats, including grain, will be beneficial as well, and I've got a video for you about that. There will probably be other supplies that you'll end up acquiring that will pertain to maybe grooming and cleaning as well. As already mentioned, your goat pen will need to house the goat shelters, but there is more that you need to think about. Where are you going to put the water trough? Is there a way for it to water 2 pens if you'll have the need for 2 pens? Where will the feeder go, and what type of feeder will be best? Now, I built this feeder right outside here. It was a DIY pallet feeder, but just so you know, just an FYI, goats will waste hay no matter what. It's inevitable. And where will you put your mineral feeders, and how will you protect those minerals from the weather, the rain and the snow? Minerals are the most important part of your goat program. If your goats don't have adequate minerals, they will get sick quick. So you can learn more about minerals also on my channel. And of course, what and where will the goat toys go? You've got to keep your lovelies occupied, and what better way than to add a few obstacles and fun things for them to jump on. It's highly possible that you will be bringing home goats with the end goal of raising them for milk. Or if you don't bring them home with that intended purpose, it's possible that that will be the end result. And if that's the case, then you'll need to add more planning to your goat pen area. For milking goats, you will need a milking area with a milking stand, a securely closed and strategically located grain bin. Believe me, goats will get into the area where the grain is located and will have a heyday. A grain day. And then goat bloat sets in and it gets bad. So make sure the grain is secure with a tight lid. If you're going to be raising goats, then you'll potentially be owning a buck or two. This is when it can get a little more challenging. Bucks are stinky and gross and will need to be contained until they are needed. I don't recommend keeping a buck with the does year around. Plan out your breeding season so that you know when your goats were bred and when to expect to start kidding. The pen for the bucks needs to be very secure and definitely tall enough that they can't jump over. The urge to breed is very strong. They will jump, crawl, wedge through anything to get to those girls, and they've even been known to breed through fences. So you have two choices. You can make an impenetrable fence between the bucks and the does. Put the pens far enough away from each other that they can't jump from one pen to the other easily. Bucks can be unruly and even difficult sometimes, but they are totally manageable. So are you ready for your next step? That's a lot of work I've just assigned you, but if you're serious about goats, then you'll get started right away. When you plan out all of what I've mentioned to the detail, you'll have a great goat pen for your goats. And if you make a plan and end up not liking it, the good news is that usually you can make some changes and make it better. In fact, I'm still making some changes to make my goat pen just right. You're ready. Go get some goats. Are they ready, do you think? Are they ready for a stinker like you? Are they ready? Are they ready for a stinker like you? What are they going to do if they feed a stinker like you, Opal? Are you hot? Yes, you're a stinker.